Monday, July 8th meeting of the Verona Common Council. Begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we'll have the roll call, please. Ms. Lynch.
Alderperson Bear.
Here.
Alderperson Diaz.
Here.
Alderperson Doyle. Here. Alderperson Manley.
Here.
Alderperson McGilvery.
Here.
Alderperson Reekie. Here. Alderperson Steiner.
Here.
And Alderperson Yurs.
Here. We have everyone here this evening. Thank you for that. Next, we have public comment. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak this evening? And if there is, if they would please come to the podium, and there should be a sign-up sheet there and state your name and address. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak this evening? Anyone from the public that wishes to speak? Going to third and final time. Anyone from the public wishing to speak this evening? Not seeing any, we will move on with the agenda. Next, we have approval of minutes from the June 24th meeting of the Common Council. The minutes were included with your packet. What is your pleasure? What is your pleasure when the minutes? We have a motion by Ms. Reekie. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Yurs. Were there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the previous meeting? Seeing none, all those in favor of the approval of the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried and the minutes are approved. Under Mayor's business this evening, again, thank you for everyone being here this evening. I see everyone survived the 4th of July and we're happy about that. It's just been a little slow time right now as far as what we're doing as far as the city business, but glad to see everyone here this evening. So we'll move along with the agenda. Next we have the administrator's report. Mr. Burns, please.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple updates this evening. First, the city will be hosting a downtown visioning session as part of the downtown project study. That will be held on Monday, July 29th at 6:30 p.m. at the Senior Center. City staff is working with staff from MSA, the consultant working on the project, on the specific agenda and an invitational letter that will be sent out shortly for that meeting. The goal is to have a discussion with members of the community about what they would like to see for character and their vision for the future of the downtown, and we'll include a brief presentation as well as small group activities to try to get thoughts and comments from people, and then a final summary vision statement exercise. Related to that, there's also going to be an online survey that MSA is working on putting together for the city, and that will be an opportunity to gather input prior to that meeting, as well as for anyone that's not able to attend the meeting to share their comments and thoughts. We're working on a draft of that and should have details of that being sent out by the end of this week. We are also working with them to provide notification for residents of that survey, as well as providing hard copy surveys for people that aren't able to take it online that would be available at the Senior Center, Library, and City Hall. The Police and Fire Commission will be meeting this week on the 11th at 6 p.m. They'll be continuing the discussion with the formation of a city fire department, including having a discussion with the fire chief about the proposed structure and potential options for the process for the hiring of subordinates for that fire department, as well as an interview for a potential candidate for a part-time police officer vacancy or additional position to assist with the police department. And then a couple of projects that will be coming up in the future. The city has included in its borrowing package for this year funds for expansion of a tactical radio system related to the Danecom communications system. At this point, we have received a quote from the vendor, Harris, that is building the Danecom system for that tactical radio component, and we are working with the city of Fitchburg on a memorandum of understanding for the governance of that tactical radio system. And that would basically provide an additional option for Verona Police, Fire, and EMS to be able to talk both with other agencies within Verona, as well as when responding to calls with the city of Fitchburg, and taking advantage of some of the infrastructure and agreements that the city of Fitchburg has, and being able to build onto that system. So we're hoping that that will be available to come forward to committee and for the city council at the second meeting in July for consideration. And then Several months ago, the city had started discussions with U.S. Cellular regarding a potential agreement for the placement of a cell tower on one of the light poles at Stompel Field and Community Park that would replace the facility that is currently located on county property in Badger Prairie Park. The city had put together some options and a proposal and sent that to U.S. Cellular. It took a while to go through their legal review process, but we now have received comments back from U.S. Cellular, and staff is in the process of reviewing that draft along with the city attorney. And again, we hope to be able to provide an update and discussion at the next city council meeting in July. And I'd be available to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Burns? Not seeing any. Bill, thank you. Next, we will have the engineer's report. Mr. Gunlock, please.
Thank you. Several items this evening. The first is well number 5, the well house and reservoir. Contractor has completed all the concrete pours. All the walls are in, the roof is on. He's also moved to the installation of mechanical equipment in the well house. The well pump and motor are in, and much of the interior piping has been completed. Contractor has indicated that all construction should be completed by the 3rd week of August and the building turned over to the city. Next project is Cathedral Point Phase 3. Contractor has completed the sanitary sewer construction, should complete the water main construction this week. He'll then proceed with the storm sewer construction. He's also has started some street grading where the utilities are in. And the construction of Cathedral Point Phase 3 should be completed by September 1st. 2013 street rehabilitation project. The asphalt paving on Thompson Drive, Mark Drive, and Melody Circle are complete. All the concrete removals and replacements have been completed in the Eastview Heights neighborhood. Contractor has completed approximately half of the street pulverizing in Eastview Heights neighborhood, and the City Public Works Department is currently adjusting manholes. As soon as the manholes are adjusted, the final grading and paving will take place. Work is scheduled for completion by September 10th. Next project is Meister Addition Phase 7. The final phase of Meister Addition to Westridge Estates will commence either late this week or Monday of next week. This construction will extend Meister Drive out to Nine Mound Road. It is anticipated that this construction will be completed by about the 6th of September. US Highway 18151 off-ramp to Epic Lane. AECom has finished the plans last week and sent them to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation for review and approval. The erosion control application was also sent to the DNR last week. This work will widen the off-ramp to 2 lanes, widen the northbound lane of Epic Lane to 2 lanes, and also extend the right turn lane on West Verona Avenue at Epic Lane approximately 250 feet. It's anticipated that construction will start probably next week and be completed by September 6th. And finally, the Lincoln Street Channel. The contractor was to start this project several weeks ago, but the June rains came and the drainage way went to flood stage. So he started today. He'll be doing removals and starting to install culvert pipe by the end of the week. This project is scheduled for completion by the middle of September. That completes my report for this evening. If there's questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Are there any questions this evening for Mr. Gunlock? Seeing none, thank you, Bob.
Welcome.
We'll move on then to committee reports. We have Plan Commission and Mr. Yers, if you would, please.
Due to me being under the weather Monday night and unable to attend, I'm going to defer to Mr. Sayer.
Mr. Sayre.
Thank you. The first item is a resolution for a general development plan for the construction of a 91-unit hotel at 613 West Verona Avenue. The proposed request is step 3 of 4 of the plan development process. So this is the 3rd step out of 4. So there's still one more step to complete after this. And this is the step that actually grants the zoning, the entitlements to the property itself. The applicant's proposing to construct a 3-story 91-unit hotel. There are a variety of exemptions that are being requested as part of this process. That is one thing that the plan development process does. It grants exemptions, zoning exemptions, in exchange for flexible development standards. This site is a challenging site since it's bounded by 3 roads. You have Verona Avenue to the north, you have Nine Mountain Road to the west, and then you have Half Mile Road to the south. It is a very difficult and challenging site to place a building on. So they've requested 5 exemptions. The Plan Commission did review the proposed request and had a good discussion on it, and then finally recommended approval of the general development plan.
Are there any questions or comments or potential motions at this point? Mr. Bear?
I have a question about the exemptions. Were there any members of the Plan Commission that had concerns or reservations about those exemptions? And I guess same question for the staff.
Mr. Sayre?
I don't recall any concerns from the Plan Commission. In general, the exemptions requested are minor. They're relatively small. You have a setback from Verona Avenue. You have another paved setback off the backside. Building orientation is pretty minor. There's a possible height exemption. Once they refine their plans, they may need to have a height exemption. Right now, they don't need that, but they want the flexibility as they move forward with their plans. There's a driveway length exemption of about 3 to 5 feet. It's pretty minor in general. And probably the biggest one is just a parking exemption of 6 parking stalls. Once again, that's pretty minor as well. So staff had no concerns with that, neither did the Plan Commission.
Okay, so it's 4 exemptions with the possibility of a 5th? Or is it 5 with possibility?
Exemptions technically.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Yurs?
The only quick question I have is on the setback. And I know the city right now is facing some challenges because of setback issues in other areas. Were those items discussed at all, and would that possibly happen with this property?
Mr. Sayre?
Sure. The setback exemption is necessary in this area because the right-of-way for this property is in front of it on Verona Avenue is quite large. This used to be part of the state highway, and when that was turned over to the city, the right-of-way that the city was given was, I guess, larger than your standard 80-foot or 66-foot wide right-of-way. It is quite large. So the setback exemption they're asking for is to have a 0-foot setback. That would actually still put the building, I believe, 15 to 20 feet behind the actual curb itself. That's how wide that right-of-way is out there. So that's why they're asking to push it right to the property line, because there is still that buffer or gap between the building and the curb.
Mr. Manley?
Thank you. Adam, I know that at this stage of the review process, we don't get into the sort of the details of architecture and so forth, but if you'd indulge just one question on that. Looking at the concept images that were included in the application, can you tell the body about what, if any, discussions were had among Plan Commission members in that regard at Monday's meeting, and offer any thoughts you have about whether or not what we're seeing as an initial concept is consistent with the Verona Avenue design overlay?
Mr. Sayre?
Yeah, I don't recall too much discussion from the Plan Commission regarding the architectural style of the building. From a staff standpoint, it is consistent with the Verona Avenue Design Overlay District. I'm still in the process of working with the applicants. This has been kind of an ongoing process, trying to refine these as well. And even a few weeks before the Plan Commission, they were still making changes to the design based upon recommendations. One of the comments that I've had from the get-go is that the building looks rather yellow. The renderings always turn out quite yellow, and that comment I've made a few times. I think the client and applicant have said the same thing. So the actual color of the building itself is not entirely accurate what was in your packet. The building is more of a tan sand type color. So that's one of the things I've been working on. The first floor of it is brick. The corner features does have stone veneer, so you have a high quality architecture in the front side of it. They're making a nice effort to have the Verona Avenue side to be inviting, to kind of bookend the other hotel in the area, to kind of complement that hotel as well. So as it stands right now, I think they're pretty close to where they need to be. I think there's a few more changes and tweaks they might have to make during the process, but they're well on their way from a staff standpoint of getting to where they have to be.
I would just add to what Mr. Sayre said, that the the recommendation that came out of the Plan Commission was unanimous with moving forward with the project. We all agree that it is a challenging site, but there was also mention that there's a high comfort level knowing the developer, knowing that they've been involved with other projects in the city, and there would be a consistency between the buildings. And so we need to finalize that yet, but a very high comfort level with the Plan Commission. Additional questions or comments? Potential motions at this point? Mr. McGilvray.
For the sake of the process and to continue any further discussion, I'll make a motion to approve Resolution R-13-024, approving a general development plan for the construction of a 91-unit hotel at 613 West Verona Avenue.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Diaz. Any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, we do have the developer in the audience if there are questions, but if there are no questions, I will call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no, and that motion carries. Mr. Yers, I assume that on agenda item number 2 we'll do the same? And 3. Mr. Sayre?
Sure. Item number 2 is an ordinance to approve a zoning map amendment for a land use amendment or zoning map amendment for land located at 613 West Verona Avenue. This is tied with the hotel as well. The current site is zoned RA, which is agriculture. The applicant's proposing to rezone the property to UC, which is urban commercial. The UC district is consistent with the uses to the east. The Holiday Inn is actually zoned UC. Properties zoned located to the north are zoned SC, suburban commercial. Properties to the west are zoned rural agriculture, and it's also the West End development. And finally, properties to the south are suburban industrial. So Plan Commission recommended approval of the rezoning request because it is consistent with the surrounding uses and consistent with the city's comprehensive plan.
You've heard the explanation. Before I ask if there's any motions, are there any comments or questions for Mr. Sayre? Not seeing any questions or comments. Are there any potential motions? Mr. Manley. Mr. Manley moves approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by, was that Mr. Yers? Seconded by Mr. Yers. Questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Mr. Sayre.
Item number 3 is a conceptual review of a proposed plan unit development to construct a mixed-use building containing both a restaurant and apartment space at 142 Paoli Street. This is step 2 of 4 in the plan development process. So this is the concept plan review. And this actual step is, there is no formal motion. It's the opportunity for the council to engage the applicants, the developers in conversation, provide them feedback, give them advice, and by no means is anything binding. So the applicants are here tonight, but I'll give a brief summary of what they're proposing. What they're proposing is a 62,000 square foot building that would contain both apartments and a restaurant space. The building itself would have 24 apartment units and 5,000 square feet of restaurant space. Right now, the site has a single family home on it that I believe is, I'm not sure if it's occupied or not, but it's I don't want to say falling apart, but the site is in some distress. So they would propose to level the site and construct this building. Tentatively, they've identified some planned unit development exemptions, including a density exemption, setback, parking, and roof pitch. Proposed building would be 3 stories as you look from Paoli Street, and would be 4 from the bike trail. The intent would be to obviously have the 24 apartment units, but then capitalize on the restaurant use on the site itself. Architecture, it's more of a traditional modern more of a modern type look. It has the flat roof to it, which is a little different than the neighborhood properties. With that said, though, the intent of that is to keep the building height lower. If they put a pitch roof onto it, the height of the building will increase. In general, the Plan Commission was open to the idea. I think the project was called interesting or intriguing a few times. Obviously, I think the Plan Commission was very concerned about the restaurant component of it. That's kind of the piece that kind of sets us apart from other projects. There's a mixed use component to a restaurant that would be serve 3 meals a day and would hopefully help the downtown, because this is in close proximity to the downtown, but would then capitalize off the tourist traffic on the bike trail itself. So in general, like, the Plan Commission was receptive to the idea, was encourage the applicants to keep moving forward. and it was a good discussion, and in general, they were positive about the development.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. We do have the applicant here. Is there anyone from the, representing the applicant that wishes to address the Common Council at this point? And if you would, again, just for our benefit and those watching at home, please identify yourself.
My name is Kyle Dumbleton. I represent the development team and also the architect on the project. Do you need my address again?
If you would, please.
Okay. 510 West Edgewater Street, Portage, Wisconsin, 53901. We're very excited about this project. We think City of Verona and the neighborhood, both the commercial and residential areas that alongside it are a great place for our mixed-use project to reside on the great asset that is the bike trail. We are looking to be a strong presence in the community, providing opportunities for both local construction jobs at the restaurant once that facility is open, and provide some unique housing opportunities for the city as well. And we think there's a little bit of a challenge to the site in that we know it's maybe not what was anticipated to be there, but we're hoping that our preliminary ideas have intrigued you enough to continue talking with us.
If you would, maybe you want to speak to the issue of neighbor reaction. I know this is something we talked a little bit about at Planning Commission, if you would, please.
Yep. The first place we actually went with this project was to the immediate residential neighbors. My partner, Bill Dresser, who's a Verona native, knows many of them. He rode his bike to Fireman's Park to swim, when he was growing up, and so he knows many of them by their first names, and I had the opportunity to meet them as well. And we showed them our initial concept, which was probably a little more dense than we're showing now. We had another building on the corner of South Nine Mound and Paoli, and we were trying to enhance the commercial aspect a little more and create a lively corner there. And we had some good concerns from the neighbors in regard to that, and so we took the opportunity to retool our concept a little bit, scale back, try to really focus on the aspects of the site that we thought were unique, and that's primarily the bike trail, but also the mix of the commercial and residential areas there. And so we did a major reduction on our density. I think we originally had probably about 40 units, and we cut down to 24. And we now just have one commercial space. And I think the majority, we had our most recent neighborhood meeting, which was attended by Elizabeth Doyle and Brad Steiner as well, and we were happy to have them there. And I think overall it was some great support. People were looking forward to the opportunity to have a neighborhood place to gather, just to talk, have a cup of coffee, things like that, or even grab a bite to eat. But I guess we have had one overarching concern, and that's probably from the immediate neighbor to the northeast, and that was Roger Roethlisberger at 138 Paoli. And I think he's probably the most affected because the scale of the project is a little larger than a single-family development, even though the zoning district there does have a little bit of flexibility with the dwelling unit types. So we've talked with Roger and extra meetings that with him privately, and tried to come up with design ideas to minimize the presence of the development on that property. And largely we've done that by trying to keep the mass of the building out of direct views of his windows on the property, and then also screen the building and the parking using vegetation and other architectural features, such as stepping the building down in close proximity to his property. And I think he's been receptive to our changes, and that's about where we stand today.
Thank you. I'll open it up to questions if there's questions from the council. Questions or comments? Ms. Reiki?
Would the restaurant, do you think, be dedicated to serving locally sourced foods?
I guess at this time, I can't say that, I'm not gonna be running the restaurant, but we see I guess that would be my preference as a consumer. And I think the main focus that we have is trying to appeal to an active crowd. And I think that's probably what an active crowd wants, is to get locally sourced things. They're thinking about everything that goes into their body. So that would be our preference as well, if we can make that accommodation.
Mr. Bear?
Yeah, there's a note in the concept plan about the amount of parking, and that there's been conversations between you and the staff about that issue. Can you talk about the options and whether you have concerns about adding additional parking? And I guess same question for the staff of what can be done if something is necessary there.
Okay. I guess our initial thought was that less parking in some instances is better. We are trying to, I'm a lead accredited professional, and we're trying to really focus on the bike trail. And so we see a little bit of push and pull between the car and the bicycle, and being a little more of an urban site. So knowing that we probably have enough space to get more parking, we I guess we're first proposing that we have a little less in hopes of having some more green space. We do think that we can probably rework things a bit, try to get most of the residential parking under the building, to use more of the surface parking for the commercial use. But I think we do have a little room as well if we do need to add more parking for the commercial space.
We did perhaps, before Mr. Sayre responds, at the Plan Commission level, we did talk about parking. And, there's an issue with some on-street parking, because there's a lot of people that currently use the street, the people that are using the bike path. A lot of times will park there. Mr. Gunlock pointed out, and he's very accurate in this, is that there's a number of semis and other truck traffic that go through there to get to the industrial parks. So we did talk at some length about parking. But Mr. Sayre?
Sure. The comment came from staff because right now they're short by code 28 parking spaces. And we were trying to look at how we could accommodate more parking on the site if we had to do it. And the first thing we looked at was, obviously in the plan development process, we can grant exemptions. So in the past, we've granted exemptions for apartment units to allow 2 parking spaces per unit. Now, if we did that as a city, they would still be short 16 spaces. So what we asked them to do was basically shift the stormwater pond towards Paoli and consider adding another row of parking, or at least having that option open, to try to get closer to what actually is required by code. I mean, we understand what the restaurant they're trying to attract now on that user. I think our intent was, if for some reason in 15, 20 years when the restaurant turns over, you don't exactly know what's going to go in there. So you want to make sure that parking is available. So if there's a demand there, you can actually get it installed. If the pond was put where it's currently showing, it's going to be very difficult to expand that parking lot in the future. So at a minimum, I think that pond probably needs to be pushed towards Paoli, just in case we do need that parking space.
Mr. Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to commend you for bringing forward a project that does include a restaurant. That's certainly a type of business that many of us have been interested in bringing more of to the city. And I also commend you for engaging the folks in the neighborhood. But I guess I feel pretty strongly about the parking issue, and while I think your bike trail concept is an interesting one, and I think it's one that probably works, I do think overall the restaurant portion is critical to this concept in general, and I'm afraid that in a community like Verona, where despite the bike trail, my family, which I've got 3 kids, including my youngest is not quite 2 years old yet. Especially in the dead of winter, I can promise you that the Manley family would not be biking from the north side of Verona to this restaurant. And I think that there are probably a lot of families in the city that are of a similar mindset. And I just think from a business standpoint, you probably would, particularly in the 6 months out of the year where, or 4 to 6 months, I guess this year, I think it was this past winter, felt like 6. But it's not always, biking great distances is not always on the minds of people who are looking to do a family meal. So I would just kind of ask you to think about that. The other thing I would mention, just on the architecture in general, although I think it's laudable that you were designed the building with a flat roof to try and minimize the height impact on the neighborhood. I think just from an aesthetic standpoint, I would be more in favor of a pitched roof and having some design elements that wasn't so many right angles essentially, just for architectural interest purposes.
Mr. Yurs?
I want to just kind of echo some of the things Mr. Manley said, and that I think it's wonderful that you went to the community first, as well as that you're trying to accentuate one of Verona's strong features in its bike path. I think it would help our downtown development as a whole if that bike path would be used a lot more. And along with that, could you talk a little bit more about the type of restaurant that you're searching for? Is it more of a diner, 3 meals a day, lunch, dinner? Kind of your hopes for that?
We would like to see a place in there that could do 3 meals a day. That's, I think, when people are active, hopefully almost all day long, and then especially transitioning to the weekend time, when there's especially people are off of work primarily all day long. So again, catering to the active individual would be ideal. We'd like to focus on menu items such as coffee, as I said, maybe ice cream, sandwiches or other light fare, perhaps a beer, wine selection, something like that, where it'd be the type of place that somebody from the west or from Madison might ride to and then return to another place. But also someone, there's a lot of neighboring businesses that we think could be serviced as well as the neighborhood. So not looking for late evening hours or I guess loud outdoor activities, things like that.
Mr. Diaz?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a few points from my notes on the Planning Commission meeting. As I'm sure you can figure out, the restaurant is really, I think, the part that people are most intrigued with about the project, just because a lot of people think we need more dining, and some people are indifferent or outright hostile to apartments. But then you say there's a restaurant with it, and all of a sudden they want to hear more about the project. So I think that's really a super critical component. And I did agree with the point that was raised, the Plan Commission, about limiting the hours to 9 or 10 p.m. Nothing later, which I don't think will be a problem. What else? The architectural design looks pretty solid to me. I think it's an excellent use of the bike trail. I want to compliment you guys on that. As far as I can tell, the density looks fine to me, and I'm fine building less parking. I tend to trust businesses can evaluate their own parking needs, and if they want to pave over less things, I think that's great. I don't think anyone wants to stare at a parking lot, so I'm totally fine with any requested exemption for parking requirements. I think it was mentioned that you guys want to try to preserve some of the mature trees on the property. That's absolutely excellent, and I guess I would encourage you to, as part of the sort of green screen, to go for density. I know the sort of classic single column of evergreens. I mean, it's very effective, and I wouldn't say to take anything out of your toolbox, but it's also good to have like multiple layers, tall, medium, short, and then you can really block it off, and it'll help block sound as well. And then I had one question. Also, you mentioned it would be LEED certified. Do you know what level you're aiming for?
At this time, we've done somewhat of a preliminary score, and we're pretty confident that we can get it certified and potentially, I think, achieve like a silver level if
Okay.
if all things go in our favor, so.
Excellent. And one other comment about the roof. Solar panels look good on a roof, in my opinion.
Other comments or questions? Mr. McGilvray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This comment is more from a constituent. Mr. Roethlisberger called me on the 4th of July, and he wanted to, because he couldn't be here tonight and speak for himself, he wanted to make sure that the public knew that he still did have some concerns about the project, and I would encourage you to continue to work with him to address some of his concerns as they relate to, his property and how they might affect his property. So I know Roger, he wasn't against it, but he did have those concerns about how they would affect him, and I would hope that you would reach out to his family again and try to work through some of that stuff.
We plan to.
I would say that I'm excited about the prospect too, and I think Mr. Diaz is right. When you mention apartments, for sure there is either that indifference or hostility, but the fact that you mention a restaurant with them makes a big difference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional, Ms. Doyle.
I just wanted to add, since I was in attendance at that neighborhood meeting, that the feedback that evening was very positive from the neighbors that did attend. The only negative comment I can think of kind of echoed Alder Manley's sentiment about the roof and just wanting a little bit more of a residential feel. Personally, I think the design looks great, and I'm reluctant to recommend going over green space to add additional parking. But again, with winter and wanting to attract families and things like that, it definitely would be something to consider. Overall, I'm excited about the plan, and it was nice to hear too that they seem like they're kind of higher end units, a little bit larger space, which I know from a personal standpoint, as a family looking for rentals and things like that, that's a nice asset to have, and to kind of add a different size in with apartments. So thank you.
Are there any additional questions or comments? Again, we're not taking any action this evening, but if we do have concerns, the applicant would desires to continue working with the staff. So if there are additional comments or concerns, Ms. Reiki?
I just had a question about it. Are there any other planned public meetings that the neighbors or anyone can have input on?
We don't have anything set up yet. We had, I think we're on a pretty personal level with the neighborhood already, and so we had told them we would definitely keep them up to date, and we do plan on having more neighborhood meetings.
Okay, I'm not seeing any additional. Mr. Sayre?
From a city standpoint, there'll be a public hearing at the GDP step at the Plan Commission, also the PIP step. So if the project does move forward, there will be at least 2 city public hearings for the project itself, along with whatever else they do on their own.
Okay, not seeing any additional hands, what I would ask then is if, after this meeting, if you have any questions or comments that you didn't think of this evening, let's funnel those through Mr. Sayre, and he can make the applicant aware of them then. Not saying that there will be any, but if there are any, please do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your feedback, discussion, and time.
Mr. Years, I believe that concludes the action from Plan Commission.
Yep, that's all.
Thank you. We'll move to the Finance Committee. Mr. McGilvray, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under item 9B1, I'll make a motion to approve payment of the monthly bills in the amount of $736,867.53.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Seconded by Ms. Doyle. Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you. In the way of explanation for this month's payments, 3 of the larger items, first being to Hammersley Stone for its fourth pay request for the Mill and Overlay program this year, $193,265.75. Second payment being to the Verona Fire District for our third quarter operational apportionment, $229,459.84. And get to the final one. Sorry to keep you all waiting.
That's right.
I usually have them all clipped out. I must have clipped it in there wrong. Well, it's an EMS payment. On page 2, $145,605.50 for our second half operating apportionment.
Thank you, Mr. McGilvery. You have heard the explanation of the major expenditures. Are there any questions for the committee or for staff? Seeing none, the motion before you is to approve the payment of bills in amount totaling $736,867.53. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried, and the bills are approved. Mr. McGilvery?
Thank you. Under item 9B2, make a motion to approve Resolution R-13-025, authorizing an application for a state trust fund loan in the amount of $600,000 for financing economic development incentive for a brewery project.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvery. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Diaz. Mr. McGilvery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Finance Committee did vote unanimously to recommend approval of this economic development incentive. I believe Mr. Burns could speak a little more of the details about the issue.
Mr. Burns?
Yeah, this would be for an economic development incentive for the Wisconsin Brewing Company. And in November of 2012, when the city approved the development agreement for that project, one of the requirements or provisions in that agreement is that the city would provide an economic development incentive in the amount of $600,000 upon substantial completion of the facility. In return for that incentive, the developer has also agreed to several provisions, including an annual minimum building valuation of $3.75 million for a period of 10 years. And that minimum valuation will generate the required tax increment and payments needed to pay back the city's debt service on the $600,000 incentive. The incentive is due upon substantial completion. That is anticipated approximately at the end of July. So this item would be making the application to the State Trust Fund Loan Program for the amount of that financing needed for the incentive. And I did want to note that the interest rate on this issue would be 2.75%. At the end of June, the State Trust Fund Loan Program increased their rate to 3.25%. But since we had made the initial inquiry for this prior to the change in rate, they would continue to honor that lower rate for us. So that's what's reflected in the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Questions or comments for the committee or for staff? Mr. Yurs?
This may be out of order, so correct me if I'm wrong. I just want to say that this is a great project, and I hope we do support this. The owner of the brewery was at the Public Safety Committee meeting a few weeks back, and also just to let people know too, as he's building, he's also going to be serving, and you can watch the building process from inside. And so I encourage Verona residents to go do that. And I think this is going to be a great addition to Verona, and I hope we support their cause.
Thank you. Additional questions, comments? Seeing none, you've heard the explanation. The motion is to approve Resolution R-13-025. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Mr. McGilvery?
Thank you. Under item 9B3, I'll make a motion to approve a professional services agreement with AECom for a Phase 1 environmental site assessment and asbestos inspection for 102 East Park Lane in an amount not to exceed $5,800.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvery. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Manley. Mr. McGilvery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As authorized by the Common Council on June 24th, 2013, the City of Verona has an accepted offer to purchase the property at 102 East Park Lane. One of the contingencies included in the accepted offer is satisfactory completion of an environmental site assessment of the property. The city has obtained a proposal from the city's engineering firm, AECom, to conduct this assessment as well as an asbestos inspection that will meet state requirements should the city wish to demolish the property in the future. Under the terms of the proposal, AECom will complete both the Phase 1 environmental site assessment and the asbestos inspection for a lump sum amount of $5,800 within the 30-day timeline required in the contingency for the offer to purchase.
You've heard the explanation from Mr. McGilvery. Are there questions or comments? We discussed this at the last meeting. Questions or comments? Seeing none, the motion before you is to approve professional services agreement with AECom at a cost not to exceed $5,800. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Is there anything else from the Finance Committee?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. McGilvray. And then we'll proceed with Public Works, Sewer, and Water Committee. Also, Mr. McGilvray.
Thank you. Under item 9C1, I'll make a motion to approve Resolution R-13-026, Memorandum of Agreement between the State of Wisconsin Department of Transportation and the City of Verona regarding roadway improvements to U.S. Highway 18151 and local roads.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Reiki. Mr. McGilvray.
I should note that the Public Works Committee voted to approve this, and Mr. Diaz did abstain from this vote. Resolution R-13-026 is a memorandum of agreement regarding roadway improvements to U.S. Highway 18151 and associated local roads in the city of Verona. The project is located at the interchange of U.S. Highway 18151 and West Verona Avenue and Epic Lane Northern Lights Road, and includes ramp terminals. The project consists of the following: adding a lane to the westbound 18151 off-ramp and reconfiguring existing lane assignments, provide 2 northbound receiving lanes on Northern Lights Drive, a minimum of 1,000 feet north of the intersection, extending to 400 feet the right turn lane of westbound West Verona Avenue onto Epic Lane Northern Lights. And the City of Verona will agree to honor the attached general conditions of the agreement, which should be in your packet. In addition, Epic will contract directly with their contractor to construct the proposed improvements and pay all associated costs incurred by the City of Verona. The project is proposed to commence on July 15th, as noted by Mr. Gunlock in his briefing earlier, and be completed by September 9th, 2013. All work will be completed under traffic.
You've heard the explanation from Mr. McGilvray. We also have city staff, and Mr. Reeder here, and Mr. Gunlock if there's additional questions. Are there questions or comments from the council? No questions or comments from the council? If not, the motion before you is to approve Resolution R-13-026. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried, and we'll have Mr. Diaz included in the minutes as abstaining from the vote. Thank you. Mr. McGilvray?
Finally, under item 9C2, I'll make a motion to approve Resolution R-13-027, approving a development agreement for Scenic Ridge Phase 5.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Reiki. Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you. The Public Works Committee did vote unanimously to approve this agreement. There's been an ongoing discussion with the developer to get us to this point. Under the terms of the agreement, the developer of the Scenic Ridge subdivision agrees to construct improvements for the lots to be improved in Phase 5. Specifically, those lots are 49 through 61, 64 through 74, 84 through 89, and 112 for a total of 31 lots. Construction is scheduled to commence on or about July 1st, 2013, with a substantial completion date on or about November 1st, 2013. The city will inspect all construction activities and bill the developer on a time and material basis. Prior to the city acceptance of the improvements, the developer shall provide the city with lien waivers for the construction of the improvements. In addition, all fees as described in the fee summary sheet in the agreement must be paid in full. I should note that the developer was at Public Works tonight and didn't have any issues that came out of discussion at that point.
Thank you, Mr. McGilvray. Questions or comments from the council? No questions or comments from the council? Again, for the benefit of those watching at home, we have a strong committee structure, and a lot of the work is done at the committee level and recommended by the committee before it ever gets here. So it's not that we're just rubber stamping all these actions. There's been a lot of staff involvement and other involvement and certainly discussion and debate at the committee level. Seeing no questions, the motion before you is to approve Resolution R-13-027. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Mr. McGilvray, anything else from Public Works, Sewer, and Water?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on then to new business. We have discussion and possible action regarding Resolution R-13-028, approving a city council iPad use policy. Mr. Burns, if you would, please.
Yeah, thank you. The city has received a donation of funds to enhance the city's electronic document and communication system. And one of the items discussed for use of a portion of those funds was providing city-provided iPads for members of the city council to use for city business, including viewing agendas, meeting packets, city email, and access to other city documents and the electronic management system. Staff has put together a draft iPad use policy based on examples that we've received from other communities that have issued iPads for elected officials. Some of the key provisions of the policy defines that the devices would be provided by the city and remain property of the city to be used primarily for city business, and that any use would be subject to Wisconsin open records and public meeting law, and the devices would be returned to the city upon the expiration of a term. It identifies procedures for the care or potential replacement of the devices, defines acceptable versus unacceptable uses, and the intent would be for that members that are choosing to receive a device, that this would be their primary source of receiving meeting packets and agendas, reducing the need to make hard copies for the city council and other standing committees. At this point, the policy is available for potential action. I'd be happy to answer any questions or take any feedback on the policy. At this point, 4 members of the council have expressed an interest in receiving a device, and we are working on setting up both the procedures as well as the setup of those devices.
You've heard the background, the explanation from Mr. Burns. Are there questions or comments from Mr. Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have 2 comments. The first one is that when you look at the iPad, what's titled the iPad policy, I wonder if it would be better to, on a more generic sense, for the city to create a tablet policy, which certainly wouldn't exclude iPads, but I wonder if we want to limit ourselves to just that product on a going forward basis. So that was one suggestion. The other one that I had, under the acceptable use portion of the policy, there's a list of incidental and occasional personal use, or things that are acceptable, and then a list of what is not acceptable. And one of the things that I would add to the list of what's not acceptable is the use of a city-issued tablet for political purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Manley. Mr. Burns?
I think that both of those would be appropriate suggestions. As far as the device, iPad is what is being contemplated right now, and in part because that has some good apps that work with the city's document management system. But I don't see a concern with making the policy more broad to potentially cover future situations. And the city's ethics code, I believe, has some language that talks about use of city resources for political purposes, but I don't see any problem with that, spelling that out in this policy as well.
Additional questions, comments? Mr. Diaz?
This might be a little pedantic, but I wonder if we can say campaign work specifically instead of political work, because technically everything we do at the city level is political work. I'd rather, because I'm thinking that's what you're trying to get at, is that nobody can be like running all their campaign off a city, which I think is probably against the law anyway, but good to be explicit.
Mr. Burns? Anything to add?
I think that makes sense, and I could work on trying to draft some language. I think I understand the intent is that it should not be used for a member's political campaign for their city office.
Or any political purpose.
Yeah. Mr. Manley?
Thank you. I mean, I guess I agree with that, but I don't think that it would be acceptable to use a city-issued tablet for a state senate race or to help somebody who's running for Congress or something. I think that if somebody wants to do something that would require the use of electronics that involves a political purpose, they shouldn't be using city-issued equipment to do it, and I'd like to see the policy reflect that. And, you know, for the record, I don't have anything against iPads. We've got 3 of them at home, which they're great products, and I think, you know, for that reason, I don't need one and won't be getting one. But I do think that despite the fact that we might be looking at iPads for the upcoming purchase, the language in the policy should be generic, technology neutral to tablet.
Thank you, Mr. Manley. Additional questions or comments? Ms. Reiki?
I just had a question about hardware. There's talk about software in the iPad policy, which will become the tablet policy. But if you're able to get keyboards or some such thing, can that be specified as well in the policy?
Mr. Burns, is that something that you've talked about or thought about?
Yeah, I don't think that there would be any problem with hardware such as keyboards or other approved accessible devices for the device. The main intent of this section of the policy, I think, is to specify that any software that's either downloaded or added should not be potentially damaging to the device or to the city network that it might be interfacing with. I think if there's interest for clarity, we could just add a comment that any hardware would also need to not be something approved for use for that device and not potentially damaging to the device.
Mr. Yurs?
I really just have a point of order question. I completely agree with the changes, especially the political campaigning. I know that's really frowned upon, and want that explicit in there. Do these need to be motioned into the document, or can we just?
What my initial thought was here, and Bill said we could take action this evening, but it appears that there's a number of changes. I don't think any of them are substantial. I don't know, Bill, my initial thought was that we could bring it back at a future meeting, but I don't necessarily think that we have to if we prefer not to. As far as the policy and getting the devices, I don't need one, I have one, but I'm fully supportive of us moving forward in this direction wholeheartedly. So whatever your desire is, we could move forward this evening, or we could delay it until the next meeting if you'd like. Mr. Bear?
And I want to echo the comments about political work not being allowed on these devices. I think that's right on the money, and appreciate that catch. I have a question that the devices are being paid for out of a fund that some members of this council today or in the future could have a conflict with. Is there a conflict there if a member were to use this device because it's paid for by that source that they also have a conflict with? And I don't think that there is, but I'm curious if anyone else thinks that there might be.
Mr. Burns?
Yeah, my personal thought is I don't see a potential conflict there. When the city sought the donation and received that, was not identified for something that would be used for any particular individual. It's being used for something that would be for a public purpose. I think there's enough separation there. I personally don't see a conflict.
Mr. Diaz?
One other note on the hardware. I think it should be specified that it's removable hardware. Not that I think anyone's going to like mod their city issued tablet, but we don't want them to either, so we should just say that they can't do it.
Additional questions, comments? I'm not seeing any. Do you desire to take action this evening, or would you prefer to have Mr. Burns draft a revised document and bring it back at a future meeting? Mr. Manley?
It would be I guess it would be my preference that because the resolution, which is what's before us, doesn't require revision, the policy itself does, that we could just go ahead and approve the resolution and with the understanding that Bill will make the changes to the policy that we've talked about this evening.
And make it available to us.
Right.
Was that a motion, Mr. Manley?
That's a motion.
We have a motion by Mr. Manley. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Yurs. We are open for discussion on the motion. Mr. Burns, please.
Just for clarity, the one change I would see to the resolution is changing the reference of iPad to tablet, but the rest of the resolution would remain the same. It's believe that's the intent.
Mr. Manley, Mr. Yurs, is that acceptable?
Yes.
Okay. Additional questions or comments? If not, the motion before you is to approve Resolution R-13-027 as revised. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Something I wanted to see for a long time, so I'm very happy about this. Next, we have issuance of operator license. Ms. Lynch, please.
A list was distributed to each of you, including the applicants and their establishments. It's a little bit longer than normal because some of these are still renewals for this period.
You have the names before you. What is your wish, your desire? Mr. Manley?
Move approval.
We have a motion by Mr. Manley to approve. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Baer. Are there any questions on the applications? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. Next, we have announcements. Do we have announcements this evening? Mr. Steiner?
Thanks, Mayor. We have 3 events taking place in our downtown in the next 7 days, and it begins tomorrow, Tuesday. It's been going on for a couple weeks, but I believe most of the people in the city are not aware that the farmers market is a very active place, and there is parking behind Hometown Junction for you to come down and look at the produce that is being offered. That's the farmers market, and it'll go on for about 10 more weeks, so put that on your calendar. It's every Tuesday. Thursday is a neat event that's starting up. It's Concert in the Park at Harriet Park, sponsored by our chamber, and the concert begins at 6 p.m. and they play on and off for 2 hours, and it usually ends about 8 p.m. And there are vendors available for people who want to bring their children for a healthy snack or treat that will support a few groups that are trying to cash in. Then on Friday, there's a men's group that is citywide. All men may attend this at the Senior Center, and it's a topic that will affect you someday. It's called Comfort Keepers. A gentleman named Steve Rudolph, thank you, will offer this event as a speaker. It begins at 9 a.m. and it's a very interesting topic, and women are allowed if you are interested in joining us, but it's kind of a neat men's group, and we get a good crowd at the Senior Center. And my last one is next Monday, a week from tonight. We have a real nice event taking place at the Senior Center called a Pie Social. Those of you who love eating fresh fruit pies and supporting the Senior Center with a sandwich and chips and a drink, lots of different pies available. It starts at 4 p.m. If you want to have a choice of your pies, you better be there by 4. But they will still be there at 7 p.m. for those of you who don't care what kind of pie you had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner. Additional announcements, Mr. Yurs?
I just want to thank everyone who came out to my listening session. We had a great discussion on downtown and how to move forward, and I've already started bringing some of those topics up to the mayor and other city staff, and look forward to working on some of those issues in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Yurs. Based on the rave reviews that Mr. Steiner was giving Peter Pan, my wife and I went to see that, and I sort of expected Mr. Steiner to come in on a wire tonight into the council chambers, but it was probably a good thing that we didn't do that. But they did a really good job, a very good job. The other announcement that I have is tomorrow evening, beginning at 5 o'clock, there is the grand opening of the apartment buildings at the West End. Terrence Wall has invited the entire council to do that, so if you desire to go there, that will begin at 5 o'clock tomorrow. Are there any additional questions, comments, or announcements? Seeing none, a motion to adjourn would be in order. We have a motion by Mr. Diaz. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Doyle. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried, and we are adjourned.